Hi, everyone. My name is Jolly Abraham, and I'm host of the Jolly Abraham Show. And today I have a wonderful guest with me who is Maria Fonseca. Maria is a poet, writer, abuse survivor, and author of the book Alone But Not Alone. She is on mission to bring awareness to childhood sexual abuse and the spiritual, emotional, and mental brokenness it leaves behind. Her message is to bring hope to adult survivors of healing and freedom through a relationship with Jesus Christ. She lives in Chicago, but she can often be found exploring other parts of the world. Maria has ministered to hundreds of children and women over the course of 10 years through various leadership roles. Her passion is to see women rescued from the darkness of trauma and living out their lives in the light of God's truth. Maria, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me here.
So I just want to say this book, viewers, if you have not gotten it already, you have to get it. Alone But Not Alone, Discovering God's Light in Dark Places. It is such a great read, Maria. I want to ask you, what made you decide to write this book?
Well, I kept hearing different stories, as I went on my healing journey from childhood sexual abuse. I would often run into women who had a similar story, but didn't have anybody really to talk to about such dark and ugly things. And so, but yet they didn't have the courage to really come out with it. So I wrote it so that I could be a voice for them. For those that are suffering in silence, who are too scared, which is very understandable, to bring this to the light, or who lack direction. They don't even know what to do with it or how to identify or where to go with it. So this book was written just from a heart of one survivor who's been through a significant portion of the healing process to help another sister, or even some brothers have read the book and have also experienced similar things, slightly different, but a lot of similar. The after effect of abuse is very similar. And so I wrote this to help them, and especially to convey the message that there is healing. Of it. Healing is, it's not impossible, it's not without reach. I am proof of that, and I want them to know that they are deeply loved. And just because these things happen to them as children doesn't mean that they were not loved by God. They were, still are, and He desires to bring them through that healing process.
Wow, that's so good. I think it's so necessary and such a topic that has just been, it's there, but nobody really ever talks about it. And I want to ask you, why do you think it's been okay that sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, has been such a secret in so many, if not all, cultures?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that it's woven into the fabric of culture, and that's always something to go hard to go against. And so, in a lot of cultures, it's normalized, and it's generational too.
Yeah.
So this has been happening, the grandmother, and then the aunts, and then the mother, and then so the child grows into the environment, and in their mind, they think, well, this is normal because I see it happening to grandma or my aunt or my cousins, and nobody is saying anything. The adults are seeing it and they're not saying anything. So it must be normal. And this must be what I have to do this is just something that's done. And so it becomes okay. And I know, like in the Latin American culture, men hold a high rank, and in a lot of cultures they do. And
Yeah.
sure, when we think about this family structure in biblical terms, yes, the men are the leaders of the home, but that does not translate into them being able to do whatever they want when it's
Right.
bad. And so there's not a clear division for children who are not raised in, Christ-centered homes. It's not familiar concept to them. And so they grow up just thinking, okay, well, this is just what I have to do. And so it goes unanswered, and unspoken until much later in life. If that, there are so many women who have never said anything their entire life and they just stuff it down. But a lot of times the mental illness comes to the surface. And then you see things like promiscuity and drug abuse and alcohol abuse and suicide as a result of something that they kept a secret.
Wow. So why do you think, of all the cultures, why do you think that sexual abuse is the highest in the Hispanic culture? I was shocked because I'm thinking, me being Indian, I'm thinking it's the highest in Indian because it's so not talked about until I read your book and I was like, wow, it transcends all cultures.
Right,
And I
right.
was shocked to see that the Latino culture was the highest, but I wonder why.
Well, we're very close. We're very close,
Okay.
and there's very, very close. So, as children, we are aware that we each play a role. Subconsciously, we're aware of it. However, we know that by saying something, we bring shame to the family. It's always about what are the people going to say, and so we're like part of this little bubble that secrets cannot get outside because what are the people going to say? And the people were like anybody who was not within our family unit, and the family unit is so tight that if you say something and you bring shame to the family, like you're aware that by you saying something, everything is going to break loose. Moms are going to be fighting dads, the uncles, other. It's like chaos will ensue, and children are aware of that. Even very young, I was aware that if I said anything about what was happening with these men, like my parents had like this image. They did the best they could, but from the outside, we looked very, very normal. But what was happening, like within the family unit, was very dysfunctional. And so we kept it a secret to keep the family together. So you let the secret out, the family falls apart. You keep the
Wow.
secret, it's like the super glue. And so it was a way of kind of protecting too the family unit. When you think about it, children, all they really know is their mom and their dad and their home. Like that's their little world. And so you talk about saying something that would destroy all that. There's just so much uncertainty and fear. No, don't say anything. You just get. I know not a lot of people are very, very optimistic. I was more of an optimistic child, and I just kept thinking, okay, one day I'm going to be an adult, and I'm not going to have to deal with this. Like this is just temporary. Like even as a mind of a child, I knew I would be able to leave someday and escape it all.
Wow. You had mentioned the people in the book. You say la gente, right? Which is Spanish for the people. And I can relate to that because, you know, you can when abuse is spoken inside your family unit, there is this fear like, oh, we can't tell other people because what are they going to think of us?
Hmm.
What are the people, whoever they are? Um, what are they going to think about us? And I love how you say in the book, like the people, who are the people, they could change, whether you were at school, whether you were at church, whether you were at a family get together, you wondered who these people were. But it was just this image that your family portrayed of what are other people going to think about us if this secret spilled out.
Right, and there's a lot of pride in the Hispanic and Latin cultures. Pride that la familia is like, it's like the bedrock, and for a lot of us it is. And even now, years after all of this, I still am very close to my family. Took a lot of work, but that family bedrock, it's like it's all we have.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to think outside of it.
Sure. And I know in the Indian culture, for us, I can't speak for every culture, but if it were to get out, I'm just thinking of the fears that
Mhm.
possibly my parents would have thought, which would be, or Indian parents, which would be, if this gets out, it's going to tarnish our family name. If this gets out, my kids are going to have a more difficult time getting married, because in our culture, right, the parents will tend to look for the spouses for their children, right? So
Mhm.
it's all about the family name. So I can think of that's one reason why they would want to keep it hush hush and just like you said, pride. I think that's not just in the Spanish culture, but in every single culture. Like we can't get it out. So would you say, Maria, that so your family, like your mom, dad, knew what was going on, with
Yeah,
the
they
abuse?
didn't. So they didn't know early on. They did find out in the one incident that I write about in the book. There were other family members that didn't know prior to that incident, and they never said anything. So already I was conditioned to be like, okay, well, you know, these people in my family and this next door neighbor know, they saw it happen and they never said anything. So I guess, it is true. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I'm not supposed to speak up because men are the ones that we're supposed to serve and respect at all costs, and not create problems. So yeah, it did in me. Once my parents did find out, and their reaction to it made things worse for me
Well,
because they did not know how to handle that, and they didn't handle it in a way that would support healing. It was actually the opposite, and that brought about another level. I could just clearly remember that day. Just I was normally just a very quiet, kind, soft-spoken person, and inside I always found some inner peace somehow, doing just things, random things, reading books, puzzles, that stuff. But that day, something completely shifted in me, and I say it was maybe around 11, maybe 10.
actually, sorry to interrupt. I think I know what you're talking about, and I actually wanted to read that part of the book, if that's okay.
Sure,
It's
yeah.
on page 62, 63 for those of you who are going to get the book. Uh, I wanted to read it because it was so profound for me. And it says this: when I was around 11 years old, a man came to visit our home. He had just arrived from Mexico and was accompanied by a female relative. I can't recall why, but my parents left my sisters and me with them for the afternoon. As he undressed me with his eyes, I mentally prepared for him to be my next abuser. It didn't take long for him to get close to me and violate me. What I didn't notice was that the lady he came with had witnessed it. When my parents came home, she told them what she saw, but the man told them I had seduced him into the sexual encounter. This may be hard to comprehend, but my parents believed him. I'm not sure what their motives were for the next course of action, but they called me out of my room and took me to a bedroom in the back of the apartment. I thought they would ask me if it was true, giving me an opportunity to tell them what he and other men prior to him had done to me. They didn't. Instead, they told me to turn around, and while facing away from them, they whipped me with a leather belt. I don't recall how many lashes I took, but there were too many. I can't remember the shameful words my mother spat at me while I took one lash after another, but it didn't matter. After the whipping, I slid my clothes back on and returned to my bedroom. My parents apologized to those people for my embarrassing behavior. For the first time, I cried about any abuse that I had endured. I vowed never to allow a man to see me cry. But my tears weren't because of my sexual assault I had experienced, or even the sting from the welts across my bottom and legs. I cried because of the humiliation and rage against my parents, especially my mother. Maria, like, tell me how you felt. I mean, I just read about the humiliation and rage, but what were you going through at that time?
It was a very difficult season to even to begin with because I was in a new school at that time too. We're constantly moving, so I was already very insecure. I'd already been abused by several men to that point, so I'd already been kind of conditioned for it. I just, going into that day, I already knew what men were going to do something to me just by the way they looked at me.
Oh,
So I was, in a lot of ways, I was already mentally preparing myself for the assault. But what I didn't expect was this other lady to tell my parents what she saw. And for them, I think, I don't know, maybe it was, I still don't quite understand why they did that. But when you think about how to react when something like this comes to the light, that's how you don't react. But I think they were more embarrassed by what actually happened,
yeah.
not how it happened, the truth, and to save face maybe with these particular visitors, that was the easiest solution for them. Um, but for me, I was just like, I was really, I guess subconsciously as an 11-year-old, I was hoping finally this is out.
Yeah.
My parents now know, and maybe I could tell them about the other guys, and maybe something good could come out of this. But no, that didn't happen, and that further fractured me, and it took me in a direction that prevented me from healing.
How
And
so?
yeah, because I was angry that number one, they didn't believe me. Um, Number two, what was the purpose of the punishment for? Why not just send me to my room? Why did it have to be so over the top? And it was just a very it was like trauma on top of trauma, all like in one day. And that's what caused a huge shift. Like I was angry, rebellious from that point out.
Wow.
Like I
That
just,
was
I
the
was
turning
normal.
point.
Yeah, because I was normally like that little girl that just always did, I always felt like I had to do everything perfect.
Yeah.
To, every like very perfectionist, very organized, very in control of everything. But after that, I was like, no, no, no more, no, like no more Mrs. Nice Guy. But it was more that I just hit a limit.
Were
And you
you
think
up?
about it,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
I said, and you think about it, when it's your own parents that now are also on the side of the other people, you have no other support. Like they're your front line. You
Yeah,
understand? And so it's different if you tell a teacher they don't believe you, or a counselor and they don't believe you.
right.
But you tell your parents and they react differently, then it's really hard to come back from that.
Sure. Were you upset? I don't know if you would know at that young age. Were you upset that they didn't even ask you what the truth
Yeah.
was?
Yes, I was. Like it was bad enough. I really didn't have a voice. I didn't really speak very much, unless I actually had to. But it was an opportunity for them to at least kind of clear the air. And I didn't know that back then. I just knew, like, wait a minute, they didn't even tell me, ask me to explain my side of the story when that happened. But now as an adult, I can process that a little bit better.
Yeah.
Know, even as a parent, I'm able to be like, that was something so simple. Instead of it letting get out of control, just pause. Why didn't they ask me first? The concept of kind of when you think about prostitution, in the sense that I have to give of my body this way in
Uh-huh.
order to earn my keep. So even at 11, I understood that because this secret accidentally got out by someone who wasn't supposed to witness it,
Yeah.
this other form of trauma was added on top of it. It solidified the importance of keeping it a secret.
Wow.
So I was extra, extra careful with the future. I think, two more abusers after that. Was extra, extra careful that no one else saw what was happening. Um, but in my mind, it was already setting me up for just a whole adolescent of promiscuity, of just sleeping with men, because this was how I was going to, earn any kind of love, any kind of form of respect, any kind of favor. Like this was all I had to offer. There was nothing else of value
Wow.
except for my body. And that was just reinforced from a young age, from 4 years old all the way through 18. And so that's what I went by. That was my identity. I was just someone who can give up a body in exchange for things. In my home, it was food, shelter. As an 11-year-old, that's really my basic needs: school, food, shelter, clothes. And so I had to keep doing these things, keeping it quiet to maintain my spot.
And would you tell your siblings? Did they know? Did you know that it was happening to them, or did you think it was just you?
No, I knew, and it wasn't, just for privacy of my siblings. It wasn't all of them, um, but it was a secret that was happening to one other of them, and we just kind of, it was something that united us, but we never spoke about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
So
we
let me,
knew
yeah.
certain person was going to come over, and we all dealt with it different, just Yeah, it was just a secret that we knew was happening, and it wasn't even in my just in my family. It was cousins, other family members that I knew it was happening to as well. But again, it was something that united us, but we kept it we never spoke about it until we were older.
Wow. So it's kind of like this hidden like unity, right? But it's never dared spoke about.
Right. It was.
Maria, I want to ask you, having endured the sexual abuse as a child, how did it shape your perspective of God? I mean, did you know about God when you were younger?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is we went to Catholic school.
Okay.
So I learned all about God. And I would see in the Catholic churches, Jesus with the lamb, and he loved children, and God the Father and the pretty dove and stuff. Like, it was all so beautiful for me, that in my spirit, like, I knew, like, yeah, God is good, because I see like all the pictures and stuff like that. And we would read the Bible in religion class. And so talk about these stories about Jesus and God being these beautiful people or spirits that helped. And when you prayed, they answered, and they protected and they comforted. And it was, and I believe that because I saw it in the books and stuff. But I didn't believe it for me. Like, I felt because Jesus was equal to, like he loved children like so much that he would always protect them. But yet I would pray to him and he wouldn't protect me.
Wow.
And so I felt very rejected. I felt like an outcast. That God was protecting all these other children that I would see in my classroom, and they were free and running around, and I would just sit like in a corner somewhere and just kind of observe. And I envied that sometimes too. If I'm very honest, I envied their innocence. Like, I knew there was something different between them and me.
Wow.
And so it made me distrust God. Like, even though he was loving and kind and that didn't change, it just made me, there was like a wedge between us, and I was in this other category of children that did bad things or dirty things. And so God didn't love them like he did to the other kids.
You
And
said
so,
you said he was loving and kind, but you didn't feel that loving and kindness towards you.
yeah, no, I felt the opposite. I felt rejected. Like, he had me in a separate category of kids that didn't deserve to be loved, protected, um, that type. And so I in my mind, I created that category of the unloved kids, and I
Sure.
put myself in there because he wasn't doing for me what he was doing for everyone else. And so that created distrust in God. I knew I couldn't trust him
Yeah.
to be my father, my provider. I couldn't trust him for any of that. Um, and that distrust stayed with me all the way until, I came to Christ in my 30s.
So you distrusted this God that you learned about in Catholic school because he didn't answer your prayers. He was just like a being, like a faraway being or something. And then also because he allowed these things to happen to you, or so you thought.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as a child, that's kind of what, as children, our reality is based on, like, our thoughts are based on our reality. And that was my reality, is that I was learning about this in school, learning how to pray, doing my first communion, dressed in white when I felt like dirt. On my communion day, it was the first day I wore all white, and I just, inside, I didn't. It felt beautiful on the outside for once, but I knew inside I just wasn't clean. It
Yeah.
was just gross.
I
Mhm.
wanted to ask you, you talk about, with the childhood sexual abuse, you developed coping mechanisms where you were trying to take control or you were trying to hide, right? And you describe them in the books as gifts from God. Now,
Mhm.
in my adult mind, I'm thinking, how is taking control and hiding gifts from God? Because I would think God wants the opposite from us, right? He wants us to surrender and he wants us to give freely. So, can you speak to that? How, as a child, that was a gift from God as a coping mechanism?
Yeah, so I describe it that way because as a child, like our minds are not developed enough to handle trauma. Where, as children, we don't know how to process, especially an early sexual awakening in such a brute force. You don't know how to your mind is not developed enough to process psychologically, emotionally, sexually. You are not at the age where that stuff should be happening to you so that you can actually process it. And so I know that, God has designed our bodies and our minds to survive, survive things. And when I think about it, and I speak to other women who've gone through it, a lot of them really, really struggled with being able to be successful in life because these things weighed them down. But for me, I had coping mechanisms. Like I developed this ability to shut people out. And that's not something that I read in a book
Yeah.
or somebody taught me, hey, you know what? If you're being abused, shut people out like this.
Yeah.
No, it's just something that God built into me. And I needed that because I didn't know how to deal with what was on the other side of the wall.
Wow. Wow.
I didn't know how to deal with the physical pain of the aftermath or the emotional trauma or the smells or all the pictures in my head. I couldn't deal with all of that. And so I built this like invisible emotional wall where um for it to not hurt so much, it was kind of like a safety place. And I got to control that. We talk about control. I got to control who and who I didn't allow behind that wall. So if I didn't want to be friends with some girl who was trying to be my friend at school because I didn't trust her or some guy, I just wouldn't let them in. I would
Wow.
just ignore them and shut them out or just feed them little bits and pieces of information, but completely withhold my inner self from them.
Wow. So you feel like because you couldn't, and correct me if I'm wrong, you couldn't control who abused you necessarily, but you were going to control this aspect of your life. You were going to control who you would allow in your heart.
Mhm. Yeah.
Wow.
And a lot of the experiences that I can recall now, they felt like out of body experiences. Like I was watching them, these things happen to me from like a doorway,
Wow.
watching them happening. And it's almost like God removed, they call it disassociation in psychological terms. But in spiritual terms, I just feel like that was the Lord removing my spirit and my inner self and holding it close to Him while my physical body was being attacked.
Sure.
And, and I feel like that was the best form of a gift that God could have given me was the ability to disassociate. Not everybody can. I speak to other survivors, and sometimes they were very present, and they have everything, every single memory attached to them still, and they had no, attacks would come to them at random, and they were just all over the place, and yeah, so I know it's not something that happens to everyone. The other thing was escapism, and I think that's probably more common
Yes.
with kids who are abused is they daydream, they escape, some of them journal, read, write, things that they can do by themselves to self-comfort. We
Yes.
talk about coping mechanisms. It's anything that a child will do to make themselves feel safe. It's like their own way of dealing with trauma to make themselves feel safe, and it comes in different forms. And
Yeah.
I love to daydream and read and get lost and not really participate too much in anything. No extracurricular activities, nothing like that. Just anything that I could do self-sufficient to make myself feel better. I did that. Now, of course, I say there are gifts for children, and I want to make sure that I explain that as we become adults and we are not responsible for
Yes.
choosing to heal, those coping mechanisms are no longer necessary. And
Wow.
in fact, that is, you're right when you say God wants us open and transparent. He wants us to heal. When you don't have that opportunity as a child because your family structure, it's all involved and there is no opportunity for you to heal. The coping mechanisms are your next best thing. But as you become an adult, you do have options. You do have a choice to go get help or just talk to someone. Um, you'll start to see that those coping mechanisms actually hurt. So keeping myself walled off from people as an adult, I was very lonely. I
Yeah.
didn't have any friends, and I didn't trust anybody. So it's really hard to develop meaningful, long lasting, deep relationships with people when you keep them on the other side of the wall.
Sure.
Thinking like, and not that like reading and puzzles and those things aren't good, they're great. I still do them to this day, but I would do those in lieu of, say, going out and socializing, or trying to make new friends, or traveling, or doing things that I really love that were like outside of the four walls of my home. So it kept me very confined. The coping mechanisms, relying them became more of a crutch. And I got to the point where God was like, you can keep doing that, but you're not walking in freedom. There's
Oh,
so much more for you on the other side of your wall if you would just let me take it down.
wow, that's so good. When you said a word and it triggered me, which is escapism. And I didn't realize, and it probably stemming from some childhood stuff that, as an adult, I will tend to escape. I will tend to see a problem and just look the other way and just try to bury myself into something that I really care about because I don't want to deal with the pain of that issue, but it's so true. What we do as a child no longer works as an adult. We have to take responsibility. We have to lean into that, which is difficult because there's growth in that. There's maturity, and we can experience God's goodness and God's light on the other side. So good. Um, Maria, I wanted to ask you, what are some other losses that you experienced through the sexual trauma? What losses can you speak to?
Yeah, so when I started to write this part of my book, it was probably the part that took me the longest to write because I had to pause and really, really think about the loss. And then unexpected grief came from it.
Wow.
As I was writing the book, I mean, I processed this stuff before, in my years of working with therapists and stuff, and with people within my church. But when I actually had to write it out, I was like, wow, I need some time to like really say goodbye to this, or just to just acknowledge that it was stolen or it was lost and I could never get it back. And the first thing was innocence. And we think about children who just play and they're open and they're free, like, and they've never seen anything or heard anything, like the innocence that was stripped away from me at the age of 4.
Wow.
I don't even have like memories of a childhood that didn't include some form of abuse within a span of, a couple of years. And so I had to grieve the fact that I was never going to get that back. I would never be able to experience innocence like that
Wow.
ever. And so it brought up anger again, anger that, at first my anger was with God, but it was really redirected to the right place. My anger was with the men who did this. They made the choice to sin against me and do these things. But I had to grieve the loss of something that I never experienced and that I will never get back.
Mm.
And so that was the first thing. The other thing was my voice. And I don't mean like my inability to speak, because I could still speak, but my inability to speak up when injustice was happening to me.
Wow.
Like I lost that confidence to say, hey, this is wrong, or stop, or, and it wasn't just, it started in the childhood, but it throughout until I came to Christ and started to heal. Even in the workplace, things happened, didn't speak up. High school, bad things happened to me, I never spoke up. Like I lost that confidence. Well, I actually never really had it because it was taken so early, but I didn't even know I could say no.
Wow. Yeah.
And so my voice was silenced, that voice that says injustice or stop or this hurts or this is bad. that was gone. I just didn't have it. And it took a while. I will be very honest. It took a while as an adult for the Lord to heal that part of me, to give me a voice to speak up, not just about my own abuse and things happening in my current life, but to be so, for God to work in me so deep that I can now write a book and bring it to the world.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
this is like mega for he gave me when he allowed me to write this book and put me on the journey. It's like he didn't just give me a voice, he gave me a megaphone.
Amen. I love it. I love it.
Lost my voice. And then I would say the third, there are others, but the third one was trust. That trust just in people in general. I couldn't trust anyone, teachers, like nothing. I just could not. And so that created this self-sufficiency. And
Yeah.
it's self-sufficiency is okay. It's not entirely a bad thing, but when you rely 100% on yourself to take care of yourself, no God, no friends, no family, like no support, it gets exhausting. You're not meant to do life alone,
Yeah.
you know? And so because I didn't trust people, I just learned to be, I'd say content, but it was really just, me not wanting anybody in to hurt me. And so distrust came in the form of even in the workplace, not getting too close to my coworkers back then because I was afraid they were going to backstab me. Like you create all these ideas in your head that people are out to hurt you when they're really not. Sure, there are some, but God had brought people into my life, as I wrote in the book. He brought people into my life that really did care about me and love me and wanted to help me. But because I didn't trust, I didn't let them in.
Wow. You know, you talk about in the book some of the messages that you said to yourself when you were younger and even at high school into adulthood. What do you think are some of the messages, some of the lies that the enemy speaks to us as a child that we don't even realize he's speaking to us, that we think to ourselves? What are some of the lies, some of the words? What are the sentences, the phrases that he is saying to us as a youngster that you think we also bring into adulthood and we are none the wiser?
Yes, I think that the biggest one is that you're not good enough.
Uh,
You're not good enough for anything to be an accountant. You're not good enough to be on the math team. You're not good enough to be that person's friend because they're just so much better. Like you are not good enough for anything other than the identity that the enemy has shaped for us. And so that closes the door on a lot of things. And so you carry the I am not enough, I am not good enough for anything into your adolescence. Well, now you're not taking advantage of things that you are good enough for because God has presented you with opportunities.
mhm.
Um, and it can come in various forms, but even as an adult, we make choices based on how our perspective of ourselves. So we're constantly told be quiet because your voice doesn't matter.
Yeah,
So then you grow up with this feeling of like you just have to deal with injustice, and if it happens to you, oh well, this is just what happens to you. You just have to uh, shove it down and move on. That type of thing. You become very it's almost like a disability that kind of forms that you can't walk in that freedom.
yeah.
It's so hard. Some of the other messages are like, you're only good for this.
Wow.
You
Wow.
only this is what you were meant for. You were meant to please men. This is the only way you're gonna have a relationship with a man is if you do these things. And so it's such a wrong message.
Yeah.
And sure, there's no shortage of men who will be attracted to that type of woman because, you know, but I always thought, like, well, then there are no good men out there that will really respect me and honor me, and treat me, my body with love and kindness. So I just kind of acted based on what I thought until I came to Christ and started to. I'm like, wow, there are some really amazing guys out here that really do respect women. And I never, they were like unicorns to me, like they were these magical creatures that didn't exist. But God really restored that perspective for me about then and about my identity. I used to walk around thinking, well, I'm abused.
Mhm.
Therefore, I no longer qualify to have a man look at me with purity because I don't even feel pure. You
Wow.
know,
Yeah.
so that was another lie that I carried, was the identity part of me walking around saying, well, I'm abused, so I'm used goods. No one's gonna want me. So I have to settle for less of a man who's gonna treat me like garbage, because at least I got a man.
Right, right.
You know, it's such a it's such a twisted
Yeah.
lie.
View of thinking. Yeah.
Such a twisted lie that we carry
Yeah. So
that needs to be exposed.
yeah, absolutely. I agree. Maria, at what point in your life did you run into Jesus or realize you need God? Was it a moment? Did it just happen? Can you go back to that time?
I kind of feel like God was allowing me to just kind of do my own thing for a little bit so that I can get to the end and see that all my self-sufficient ways, everything that all this world that I built for myself was no longer holding me up.
Yeah.
I was depressed, was sick and overweight, just not doing what my marriage was hanging on by a thread. And it was a dysfunctional marriage, to say the least. Um, but even in your dysfunction, you can stay for a long time to try to figure out what's wrong. But until you come to Christ and you start to see things through his light, you won't understand just how bad it is.
Mm.
And so I got to a point where I was about 34 years old, and I decided to participate in this breast cancer walk because I just felt so numb. Like I felt so numb in life. Like I wanted to do something that mattered to someone. I had no friends other than some coworkers and my family. That was pretty much it. Um, and I wanted to feel something. Just I wasn't sure. And the radio advertisement came on for this 3-day cancer walk, 60 miles. I was like, oh, I could probably do that. And I signed up for it like without thinking about it. And it was during the walks that I would walk with my dog. I had a golden retriever at the time, and we would do these long walks up at Lakeshore Drive in Chicago.
Yeah.
Peaceful, and God began to use those for me to just think outside of the noise
Oh,
and
wow.
just to enjoy his peace and nature. Early in the mornings, the training walks. Then the events came. This was August of 2003. The event happened, and it was during the 3 days of walking that I started noticing, how do you say, humanity and pain in other people's lives. Because
Wow.
when you're depressed, you only see what's in your own bubble. You only see your pain,
Yeah.
your sadness, your loneliness. You can only see how miserable you feel inside, but it's hard to see other people's pain.
Yeah.
And this event took me outside of that and allowed me to see people who have lost loved ones. People were praying, and I kept thinking, wow, I have not prayed in like years. And so reminding me of God again, after not really thinking about God for a long time,
Sure.
or his importance or anything in my life. He didn't really mean anything to me. And so just seeing it prompted me to remember God. And then I was the third day, and we were almost done with the walk, and my legs just would not work anymore. And I remember going into porta potty and praying. I'm like, God, we haven't talked in a long time, but if you really do answer prayers, can you please make this pain go away in my legs? I can finish this. I'm like, not for me, but for like all those people out there that I'm seeing, the moms who are gone, the dads who are walking around with t-shirts because their wife passed away and they have little kids, like all of them. And it was like so supernatural that
Yeah.
I walked out of the porta potty and I was able to walk. Like it was numbness from the bottom, but I could actually walk, and I finished it. And the interesting thing about the timing, like the timing of God is so accurate.
Amen.
When,
Yeah.
when you're ready, when you make that decision, you want to change. He's like right there on the ready.
Yeah.
He's ready. And my sister had been attending Chicago Tabernacle Church. She's been attending a women's Bible study.
Okay.
She'd asked me a few months prior if I wanted to attend with her. I was like, no, it's okay.
Right. I'm good.
After this experience, we went home from the event, and we were sitting in my mom's kitchen, and she asked me again. She's like, that Bible study is going to happen again. Do you want to come? And this time my answer was yes.
Wow, look at that. Praise God.
Because I used that event to open a window of my heart towards the fact that there is this entire other world outside of my depression, my anger, my pain, that I participated in helping raise some money to help some other families.
Yes.
Opened a window of my heart to let some love out.
Wow.
You're really sheltered. You're like, you have a lot of love to give, but because you're behind this wall, you don't really, it's not flowing freely in through you and out. It's just in. And so this just opened up a door, and I was able to just love on some people in a very small way. But God used that to bring me into his church.
Wow. I love that about God, how he is just ready. It doesn't that show you he's waiting on us,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you from your freaking potty, you had a request to the Lord. I mean, look how intimate our God is, right? That you made a request to God and he met you right then and there. You had a need and God met your need. And that's how he's so amazing, right? Like whatever our requests are, he meets us where we're at. He meets us to the level of our faith. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It was a wonderful event, and like that was my turning point. And from then, I visited the church and started participating in this Bible study. In the very first session, like I started to hear other women with similar stories or even worse stories than mine, and yet they were glowing like the love of Jesus, and God was just all over them. They were so radiant. I'm like, how could this be? How could they have gone through so much and they're looking like this right now? And that's what the love of God does when it washes over you and it starts to heal you. Like all the grime falls and his light just shines. And it was beautiful.
Yes, amen. You talk about in the book, I want to say on page 108, that in order to heal, you said you had to humble yourself and that you had to say you couldn't do it on your own. Why do you think, Maria, that pivotal moment is so necessary in the healing process where we come kind of to the end of ourselves, the end of our rope? Why is that necessary to heal? Why can't we just pray and ask God to, just do it?
Yeah, because we're always going to go default back onto our own selves.
Oh,
If
wow.
we're honest, if we decide, okay, we're going to give God a chance and we're going to say, all right, God, heal me. And if he doesn't heal you like within a day or whatever timeline you put on him, and you'll be like, you know what, it doesn't work. And you're out. You have to be fully committed and fully surrendered to him, all your parts. And I say that because I had this big wall. And I could just reach over the wall and say, all right, God, I'm going to give you this part of my heart and just this part. But no, I had to be like, you know what, God, I'm giving all of it to you because what I built for myself, it's not working. It hasn't been working. Maybe it helped a little bit when I was a kid, but it's no longer working and I'm getting worse, not better. And so I'm surrendering everything to you because I can't heal myself. Psychologists could not heal me.
Wow.
Drugs, Medicaid, Prozac couldn't heal me.
Wow.
Those things were just kind of medicating. And even with psychology, I don't bash it in any way. It's important.
Sure.
Understanding, because understanding wasn't the issue. I'd gone through some therapy sessions before I came to Christ, and I understood that number one, it wasn't my fault what happened. I understood there was an understanding in my mind. It wasn't my fault. My parents should have been there. Things should have reacted differently. Like all these things, I understood they were wrong, but that didn't help me heal.
Wow. So the knowledge itself didn't heal you.
No. I knew that there was this part inside of me, this whole, like this area, a holding area it was the area that I kept everybody away from.
Yeah.
My spirit or my soul and my deepest thoughts and my desires, all of those were stored there under lock and key.
Yeah.
And in order for for those to be accessible, no amount of therapy or drugs could help that. Only God could get that, because he was the one who created me, and he was the spirit in me. He lived in me and he created me, and I know that he was the only one who could get to heal those parts. So when we talk about, and I talk about in my book, the parts of me, we have our mental health, we have our physical, our emotional, and our psychological. All those parts have to be healed, but the spiritual one, it's only God can get in there.
Mhm.
Physically, yeah, we could take some medications and feel better. Emotionally, we could talk to people and feel better. It's all about feeling, but to actually truly heal and like experience walking in that freedom, and to like really discover who you are and who you were meant to be and the calling on your life, you gotta let God into that part, because that's where like all your deepest desires are.
Wow, that's so good. So you would say, in order to really be free in your life,
Mhm.
free of shame, free of guilt, free of depression, free of desperation, loneliness, all of that, you have to heal your spirit.
Yes, yeah, your relationship with God needs to be restored to what it should have been as a child. A loving relationship where that is God, your Father, and you depend completely on Him for everything, to help you when you're sad, to help you with your emotions. Like the emotions are not bad things. Those are like emotions are kind of like the lights on your car in your panel. If one lights up, it's red. There's something wrong. You got to tend to it. So your emotions are good because they tell you something is wrong or something is good if it's a happy emotion. So they're healthy. But when they're all lit up red, and you have all these things going on, chaos in your emotions, that's where you have to start tending to those things.
Wow,
So, yeah.
wow. So how has your healing journey been with the Lord, Maria?
It was rough in the beginning. I will be very honest, it wasn't easy. There were a lot of times where I just wanted to give up because it was too hard. It felt like two steps forward, one step back a lot of times.
Yeah,
And I would revisit something like, God, haven't we already discussed this particular area of the trauma? Why are we revisiting this?
yeah,
And it's God is extracting more wisdom from those experiences. He didn't want me to necessarily to relive the pain, but there was some teaching that I know, some wisdom that needed to be extracted from the wound. And so um, I learned to trust God little by little. I always say that because I didn't just jump in and say, all right, Lord, here's everything. Little by little, as he began to heal one little piece or one, and he began to show me through my relationship just with him, through his son Jesus, how little by little he can take a memory, extract the wisdom, remove the pain, and then you move to the next piece. Extract
wow.
the wisdom, or just even maybe not even wisdom, just seeing that he really was there when you thought he wasn't. That was some of the most beautiful things, that even bringing people into my life at different times, people that really saved my life.
Mhm.
And I didn't even realize that God had put them in there
Yeah,
so that I would not perish prematurely.
wow. Maria, what do you say to that girl or guy who has been sexually abused as a child, who's endured so much pain, so much trauma, who is really so hurt by God, so angry, so bitter towards God for the things that he allowed or the things that he has caused? What do you say to her?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, like, I'm sorry that this happened to you, because I can understand that pain. Like, I can relate to it. And, I stand united with this person who's listening today. Um, and I want to acknowledge that their feelings are valid. All the emotions that they're feeling, they're valid. They're not crazy. They're not crazy to have been able to not be able to just move on. It's okay to be wherever you're at in the healing process, even if you haven't made the decision to walk into healing yet. It's okay. And number two, I want them to know that even though these bad things happened to them as a child, it didn't mean that they weren't loved.
Wow.
We live in a world where God has allowed us to make choices, and we can either make choices that are edifying and beautiful and help people, or we can choose to operate in our sin nature and make choices that destroy other people. And the perpetrators in our lives made choices to damage us. It wasn't God who put that in their head. He is not the one responsible for the actual act of the abuse towards us. Could he have stopped it? Yes, he could have. But just because he chose not to didn't mean we weren't loved. God also has a plan. He talks about it in the Bible. He has a plan to restore us and completely. So when he allows us to go through hard things like that, he also has a plan to restore us.
Wow.
You know, our decision then to accept his offer to heal us. So I want to let them know that it's not that you were unloved and he allowed these things to happen to you. No, it's that he also had a plan of redemption. So that invitation is for them here today to just say yes to God and say, heal me. The other thing I want them to know is that despite all the voices, all the negativity and all the thoughts, because the thought process gets really, really damaged. All the lies that you're told, when you start to heal, you start to see the truth. And then the truth allows you to walk in a little more freedom.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so, and the last thing I really want to say is to just really encourage them to be bold, be brave, because
Yeah.
it takes a lot of courage
Yes.
to want to heal, to actually step out and do it. But I want them to know that they're not alone in that healing process. Throughout my journey, I felt God every step of the way, kind of helping me when I wanted to give up, showing me what I needed to move, allowing me to move on to certain persons, making me come back and learn something else. But he is very, very present in that healing process. It's not something you do alone.
Amen. I love it. So your book, Maria, Alone but Not Alone. Why did you choose this title?
Because as a child, I thought I was by myself, like in this world, like this really dark, and even as an adolescent and young adult, just always kind of like I was alone behind this wall, but through the process of writing my story, I pinpointed areas where God was really there. I just didn't see him. I couldn't acknowledge him. I didn't recognize him as a beacon of light, whether it was through a teacher or through a friend or through a circumstance. Or I look at my life right now. I am successful in business, and I have a little spot for myself in the world. I have a ministry where I can help a lot of people. That is like the definition of success,
Amen.
but
Amen.
it was because the Lord I can acknowledge him now. He was there helping me every step of the way. I didn't do any of it by myself.
Amen.
I wasn't by myself at all.
Yeah.
He was, I thought I was alone, but I really wasn't. He was just there the whole time in the background.
Yeah. Yeah. Until he's now in the forefront.
He's in the forefront and he's like leading the way.
Exactly.
And
Exactly. That's what happens in the end, which is the way it should be.
Yeah.
So, friends, if you haven't gotten your copy, you must go out and get Maria's book, Alone but Not Alone. It is such a great read. It's just not about child sexual abuse. There's so many nuggets of truth. It's so direct. It's so candid. I love your story, Maria. Everyone has to go out and get it. If you experience sexual abuse as a child, if you are a friend or a family member of someone who's been abused, a parent, caregiver, teacher, counselor. I mean, everybody really just needs to get your hands on this book. And I will put it down in the show notes, a link to where we can get that book. Maria, and where can you just tell us quickly how we can get this book?
Sure, it's available for Kindle on Amazon, and in paperback, you can get it on my website, www.mariafonsecawrites.com.
Okay, fantastic. And I'll put your link down in the show notes.
Okay.
Well, that is it for part one. I want to thank you so much again, Maria, for coming out, and join us next week as we dive into the more educational piece about child abuse, some of the tips on how to prevent it, warning signs, things to look out for, conversations to have with your children about sexual abuse or what to look for. So stay tuned. Thank you again, Maria.
Thank you.
Bye.